The Elven Prince's star map. The air in the library of Vale Thorn was thick with dust and silence, the kind that only centuries of solitude could weave. Moonlight trickled in through a lattice of stained glass, painting a kaleidoscope of muted colours on the rows of forgotten tomes. Lira sat hunched at an ancient desk, her fingers tracing the faded lettering of an old book titled Myths of the Starborn. Her fascination with the stars had always been insatiable, a fire in her chest that maps and telescopes could never quite satisfy. Tonight, though, the fire felt different, more insistent. She had been drawn to this book as if by invisible threads, the whispers of forgotten stories, luring her deeper into its brittle pages. And then she found it. A single sheet of parchment, folded carefully between two chapters, fluttered free as if it had been waiting for her. At first glance, it looked like a map of the heavens, but as her eyes adjusted to its subtle glow, she realized the stars on it were moving. Slowly, deliberately, they shifted and rearranged themselves, forming constellations she didn't recognize. The map was beautiful and unsettling. Its edges were gilded with a silvery thread that shimmered in the dim light, and the ink smelled faintly of lavender and rain. She reached out to touch it, and as her fingers brushed the surface, the map came alive. A faint hum resonated in her chest, vibrating with a language she couldn't understand but felt in her bones. At the bottom of the map, an inscription began to glow, written in the looping, ethereal script of the ancient elves. The path to what was lost begins where the North Star rests on the mountain's edge. A chill ran down Lyra's spine. She had heard tales of enchanted artifacts, but this felt different. The map seemed alive, its movements purposeful, as though it was watching her, waiting for her to act. "Only the chosen may pass," she whispered, reading the legend scrawled faintly along the edge. The words lingered in the air, their weight heavy with unspoken promises and hidden dangers. Her heart raced. Should she take it? Was it even hers to take? But deep down, she knew the map wasn't meant to stay here. It had been forgotten, buried beneath layers of dust and neglect. But it had found her for a reason. The pull she felt wasn't curiosity alone. It was something more profound, an ancient call echoing through time. Her decision was sealed when she stepped outside, the map tucked into her satchel. The sky above was restless, the stars brighter than she had ever seen. A comet blazed across the heavens, trailing sparks of silver fire. It seemed to point north, toward the mountains on the edge of the horizon. The words from the map echoed in her mind. The path to what was lost begins where the North Star rests. For the first time in her life, Lira felt as though the stars were speaking directly to her. The journey was daunting, fraught with uncertainty. She had no guide but the map, and no companion but her own determination. Yet as she took her first step toward the distant peaks, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of purpose, as though her life had been leading to this moment all along. The wind whispered around her, carrying with it the faintest trace of music, soft, mournful, and impossibly old. The map hummed in response, and for a fleeting second, she thought she saw a constellation form in the sky above. But when she blinked, it was gone. Still, the feeling remained. She was walking not into the unknown, but towards something that had been waiting for her. A destiny written in starlight and sealed in mystery. Lira tightened her cloak against the chill and began her ascent, the map's gentle glow illuminating her path as the first stars of twilight shimmered overhead. The silence of the library was gone now, replaced by the quiet promise of the heavens. The journey north was unlike anything Lira had ever known. Days passed in a blur of jagged trails and frostbitten winds, with the map as her only guide. It glowed faintly in the dark, its shifting constellations illuminating paths where no roads existed. By night, the stars above seemed to echo its movements, as if the heavens themselves were conspiring to lead her forward. On the seventh night, she reached the base of the mountains known as Orethiel. Their jagged peaks clawed at the sky, cloaked in eternal ice and crowned by the pale shimmer of the North Star. Lyra's breath turned to frost as she stepped into the shadow of the range, her boots crunching against the frozen earth. The map hummed against her chest, a subtle vibration that quickened with every step. Hours of climbing brought her to a plateau, its surface polished smooth as glass. At the center stood an archway carved from crystalline stone, its structure unnatural in its perfection. The arch pulsed faintly, as though alive, and its surface was etched with intricate runes that mirrored the symbols on the map. Lira approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. The map's glow intensified, casting a silvery light across the frozen landscape. As she held it aloft, the runes on the arch responded, flaring with an otherworldly brilliance. A low hum resonated through the air, growing louder until it became a chorus of voices, ancient, melodic, and layered with emotion. Before Lira could retreat, the arch dissolved into a cascade of starlight, its particles swirling around her like a celestial tide. When the light faded, the world beyond the arch was no longer the barren mountain pass. She stood instead at the edge of an ethereal kingdom, Starhaven. The name came unbidden to her mind, as if whispered by the winds themselves. The kingdom stretched before her, a city of crystalline towers and silver trees that glowed softly under a sky painted with auroras. Rivers of liquid starlight wove through its streets, their surfaces rippling with faint constellations. The air was still, yet charged with an ancient power that made Lyra's skin tingle. As she stepped forward, The silence became oppressive. No footsteps echoed, no voices filled the air. It was as if the city held its breath, watching her, waiting. Shadows moved at the edges of her vision, indistinct shapes that dissolved when she turned her head. Despite the beauty of Starhaven, unease prickled at the back of her mind. Lira wandered through the empty streets, her footsteps light against the crystalline paths. She passed what looked like homes, their windows dark and hollow, and courtyards overgrown with shimmering vines. The absence of life was haunting, yet the city didn't feel abandoned. It felt suspended, as though caught between moments, waiting for time to restart. At the heart of Starhaven stood a grand palace, its spires piercing the auroras above. The map's glow intensified, pulling her towards it with an almost magnetic force. As she entered, her breath caught. The interior was a masterpiece of artistry, every wall adorned with carvings of constellations and ancient elven figures. At the center of the great hall stood a pedestal, atop which rested a massive star chart. It shimmered faintly, its surface pulsing like a living thing. Lira approached, her hand trembling as she traced the edges of the chart. It was then she noticed something peculiar. A blank void in the sky above Starhaven, where a constellation should have been. The emptiness was stark, an absence that drew her gaze like a magnet. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber, deep and resonant, yet tinged with sorrow. Complete the sky and awaken the light of the crown. Lira spun around, but she was alone. The voice reverberated through her mind, growing fainter until it was no more than a whisper. The map in her hand began to shimmer, its constellations shifting once again, forming a new path that pointed to the highest peak in the kingdom. She turned back to the star chart, her reflection shimmering faintly in its surface. The missing constellation was no mere accident. It was the heart of the kingdom's slumber. Somehow, she knew her journey had only just begun. Starhaven's silence was not emptiness. It was a waiting breath, a pause before the first note of a forgotten melody. Lira clenched her fists, determination welling within her. She would find the missing stars. She would restore the light of the crown. And perhaps, just perhaps, she would uncover the truth of this hauntingly beautiful kingdom suspended between time and eternity. The air grew colder as Lira ascended the crystalline staircases leading out of the palace, her footsteps echoing faintly in the stillness. The map pulsed faintly against her chest, the stars within it shifting into a path that guided her eyes to the heavens. Above, the void where the missing constellation should have been loomed like a wound in the sky. The voice she had heard in the great hall lingered in her thoughts, a solemn command that felt like both a plea and a warning. Complete the sky and awaken the light of the crown. Her path wound upward, toward the jagged spires of the mountain, visible even from the heart of Starhaven. The peaks glowed faintly, reflecting the ethereal auroras that danced above. It was there, she knew, that the missing constellation's secret lay, waiting to be found. Starhaven stretched below her as she climbed higher, its empty streets and silver trees bathed in a ghostly luminescence. The stillness was oppressive, heavy with the weight of countless unspoken stories. Lira couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, not with malice, but with quiet expectation. Shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, figures she couldn't quite see, yet knew were there. The path turned treacherous as she neared the mountain's summit. The crystalline ground gave way to rougher terrain, frost clinging to jagged outcroppings of rock and ice. The map's glow dimmed, as if conserving its light for the moments when she truly needed it. The air grew thinner, her breath condensing in wisps before her. At last, she reached a plateau near the peak, where a single massive obelisk of black stone jutted toward the heavens. Its surface was smooth and reflective, as though it had been carved from a piece of the night sky itself. Runes, identical to those on the map, glowed faintly along its edges, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed to match her heartbeat. Before Lira could approach, the ground beneath her feet began to shift. A low rumble spread through the air, and the faint glow of the auroras above intensified. From the shadows of the surrounding cliffs emerged figures, vague, spectral forms draped in light and shadow. Their faces were indistinct, but their movements were deliberate, purposeful. They formed a circle around her, their presence as silent as the void in the sky. Lyra's heart raced, but some instinct told her not to run. These were no enemies. They were guardians, echoes of the kingdom's past. One of the figures stepped forward, its hand outstretched. It held a shard of starlight, a fragment of the missing constellation. The shard flickered, weakly, as though it were on the verge of extinguishing. The figure tilted its head, a gesture both curious and mournful, and Lira realized it was offering her the shard. She hesitated, then reached out. As her fingers closed around the shard, a voice filled her mind. Not the deep, commanding tone she'd heard before, but a softer, sorrowful melody. To restore the stars, you must offer what was taken. Are you prepared to pay the price? The shard pulsed faintly in her hand, its light reflecting in her eyes. The question lingered, not just in her mind, but in the very air around her. She didn't know what the price would be, but she could feel its weight pressing against her. Would it be her freedom, her memories, or something far greater? Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling but resolute. She had come too far to turn back now. The figures dissolved into streams of light, their essence swirling around her and lifting her into the air. The shard in her hand flared brightly, its light melding with the void above. The missing constellation began to form, its stars igniting one by one. But as they did, pain lanced through her, sharp and unrelenting. Images flashed before her eyes, memories of her home, her family, and the life she had left behind. They slipped away like grains of sand through her fingers, leaving her hollow, yet strangely at peace. When the constellation was complete, the auroras above exploded in a riot of color, bathing Starhaven in brilliance. Lira fell to her knees as the light faded, the shard in her hand now a mere fragment of glass. The silence returned, heavier than before. The obelisk's runes flared one final time, and a path appeared, leading higher into the mountain. Beyond it, Lira knew awaited the final trial, the truth of the crown and the fate of the kingdom. She rose, her steps faltering, but her resolve unshaken. The stars above no longer felt distant. They felt alive, watching her, guiding her toward the destiny she had unknowingly claimed as her own. The path to the mountain's peak shimmered faintly, its surface appearing less like stone and more like the edge of a dream. Lira pressed forward, her every step accompanied by the subtle hum of the map now nestled against her chest. The constellation she had restored burned brightly above, a tapestry of stars woven back into the night sky. Yet with every step higher, the air grew heavier, charged with an unseen energy that prickled against her skin. When she reached the summit, the landscape opened into a circular plateau. The ground beneath her glimmered with fragments of ice and starlight, forming patterns too deliberate to be random. At the center of the plateau stood a towering spire of crystal, its surface etched with runes that pulse in time with her heartbeat. Surrounding it were pillars of light, each swirling with the colors of the aurora above. As Lira approached the spire, a wall of wind roared to life. It wasn't a natural wind. It carried voices, fragmented whispers of warning and lamentation. The auroras above surged violently, their colors deepening into shades of crimson and indigo. The plateau trembled as a figure emerged from the spire, its form coalescing from shards of light and shadow. It was him, the Elven Prince. He stood tall, draped in armor that gleamed with celestial radiance. Chains of starlight bound his wrists, stretching back to the spire behind him. His face was both youthful and ancient, marked by sorrow and strength. His eyes, silver as the moon, met Lira's, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. "You have come far," he said, his voice resonant yet heavy with exhaustion. "But to awaken the star crown, you must face the truth of what has been lost." Before Lira could respond, the auroras descended, spiraling around the plateau. The colors formed into scenes, fragments of memories and echoes of a past long buried. She saw Starhaven as it had once been, a vibrant kingdom of light and song. Its people, tall and graceful, danced beneath the heavens, their joy reflected in the stars above. But then came the fall. The images shifted violently. The auroras showed a sky ablaze with celestial fire, constellations tearing themselves apart as an ancient war raged across the heavens. The prince stood at the heart of it all, wielding the star crown, a relic of unimaginable power. To save his kingdom, he made the ultimate sacrifice, severing Starhaven from time itself and binding his soul to the stars. His people became echoes, caught between life and memory, awaiting the day their light could return. The auroras dissipated, leaving Lira breathless. The prince's voice broke through the stillness. The trial is not a test of strength, but of sacrifice. To restore Starhaven, you must do what I could not. Will you bear the burden of the crown? Lyra's heart pounded. The question hung in the air, its weight nearly crushing. She had felt the loss of her own memories, the ache of letting go of the life she had once known. But this was something far greater. The crown was not a gift. It was a covenant, a binding promise to the stars, one that demanded more than she had ever imagined. I don't know if I'm worthy, she admitted, her voice trembling. The prince's gaze softened. None who face this trial believe they are. Worthiness is not granted. It is forged in the fire of choice. The aurora surged again, forming a sphere of light around the spire. Within it, Lira saw the star crown, a circlet of silver and starlight, its edges shimmering with the power of 1,000 suns. It was beautiful and terrible, a relic that held the weight of an entire kingdom's fate. As she stepped closer, the whispers of the wind grew louder, voices pleading with her to turn back. But amidst them, another voice, softer, steady, spoke in her heart. To restore the stars, one must become their keeper. Lira reached out, her fingers brushing the crown. Pain erupted through her, not physical, but something deeper, as though the crown was sifting through her soul, weighing her fears, her hopes, her very essence. She felt pieces of herself slipping away, the last remnants of her life before Starhaven, the comfort of her humanity, her very name. In their place, a profound connection to the stars filled the void, anchoring her to the heavens. When the light faded, she stood at the center of the plateau, the star crown resting lightly on her head. The prince knelt before her, his chains dissolving into stardust. "You have done what I could not," he said, his voice filled with both gratitude and reverence. "The crown is yours, star-born queen." The auroras above calmed, their colors softening into a serene dance of light. For the first time, the kingdom of Starhaven began to stir. The silence broke as faint voices, joyful, melodic, filled the air. Lira turned to see figures emerging from the shadows. the people of Starhaven returning from their slumber, their forms radiant with renewed life. And as the first stars of dawn appeared, Lira realized the truth. She was no longer just a traveler guided by a map. She had become the bridge between the mortal and celestial realms, the light that would guide Starhaven into its rebirth. The crown felt impossibly light upon Lyra's brow, yet the weight of its meaning pressed deep into her spirit. The auroras above shifted into vibrant hues of gold and violet, cascading across the sky like rivers of molten light. Starhaven was no longer silent. Faint melodies echoed through its streets, rising in a gradual crescendo, as though the kingdom itself was awakening from a dream that had lasted centuries. The Elven Prince stood before her, his chains of starlight gone. Though his posture remained regal, his expression was softened by relief. His form shimmered faintly, as if tethered only loosely to the world he had saved at such great cost. "The star crown has chosen its keeper," he said, his voice carrying an undertone of reverence. "And with it, the kingdom will breathe once more." Around them, the figures of Starhaven's people began to emerge from the shadows. Ethereal and luminous, they materialized like mist, coalescing into form. Lira watched in awe as their features became clearer. Faces marked with the elegance of ages past, their eyes filled with wonder as they gazed upon her. They whispered in languages she didn't know but somehow understood, their voices weaving together in a symphony of gratitude and hope. Yet amidst the beauty, there was a lingering ache in the air. Lira turned to the prince, sensing his unease. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotion inside her. The prince gestured toward the horizon where the first hints of dawn began to break. "The light of the crown will restore what was lost, but it is not without its cost. The kingdom will live again, yet I cannot stay." Lyra's heart clenched. "Why? You've sacrificed so much already." He gave a faint smile, one tinged with both sorrow and acceptance. "The crown's power is tied to the stars, and so am I. My time ended when Starhaven fell, and my soul became its anchor. You have freed me, but freedom means I must return to the heavens." Before Lira could respond, the map at her chest began to glow once more. She removed it carefully, watching as its constellations shifted and aligned with the sky above. The stars within it pulsed in rhythm with the crown, their light spilling outward like waves. The ground beneath her feet trembled, not with fear, but with life, as the kingdom itself began to awaken fully. The silver trees of Starhaven burst into bloom, their branches heavy with luminous blossoms. The rivers of starlight that wove through the streets grew brighter, flowing faster, as if rejoicing in their freedom. Towers that had once seemed fragile now stood strong, their crystalline walls catching the auroras and reflecting them in dazzling displays. The people of Starhaven began to move, their steps hesitant at first but growing steadier with every moment. They knelt before Lira, their faces radiant with gratitude. She raised a hand, unsure of what to say, but the words seemed to come from the stars themselves. "Rise," she said softly, her voice carrying across the plateau. "This is your kingdom, your home. Live as you once did, under the light of the stars." The Elven Prince stepped closer, his presence both comforting and bittersweet. "You have restored more than a kingdom," he said. "You have restored hope. The stars will sing of your name for ages to come." As he spoke, his form began to dissolve into particles of light, each one drifting upward toward the heavens. His gaze lingered on her, filled with a quiet pride. "Lira, starborn queen, keeper of the light, thank you." And then he was gone, a trail of starlight fading into the dawn. Lira stood alone at the peak, the crown's glow dimming into a soft, steady pulse. She looked down at Starhaven, no longer a silent, forgotten place, but a realm of vibrant life and endless possibility. She felt the weight of her role settle into her being, not as a burden, but as a purpose. The map in her hands crumbled into stardust, its task complete. The stars above shimmered brighter than she had ever seen, their patterns familiar now, as though she had known them all her life. She closed her eyes and felt their presence, their guidance, as they whispered promises of guidance and unity. With a deep breath, Lira descended the mountain, her steps steady and sure. The people of Starhaven awaited her, and she would lead them, not as a ruler, but as a bridge between worlds, a keeper of their light and their future. And so, under the eternal dance of the auroras, Starhaven was reborn, its legacy forever etched into the constellations above. The tale of the starborn queen and the Elven Prince became a story told not in words, but in the silent language of the stars. A miracle written across the heavens for all to see.